speaker issues. I would just like to take a second to thank you guys for being here with us for the Gateway Course Success Community of Practice. I think we're going to have a lot of good things to share with you all today. And I'll just reintroduce myself again. I'm Ashley O'Neill, the Associate Director leading the strategy for the collaborative Gateway Course Success. And again, I thank you guys for being here and joining us. Hope we have some good things to share with you today. I'll just kind of kick it off so we can get started. Today we have John Hawes who is presenting today in the name of Online Gateway Course Success, and we're excited for him to share. And with this presentation, we hope that we can do a lot of sharing of data and then a lot of discussion about some of the findings in this presentation. So without further ado, I will kick it over to John.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I appreciate the opportunity to present today, and certainly thank you all for joining this session. We've been doing these community of practices for a while, and this academic year, we started with this idea of themes for what we want to talk about. And when it came time for me to think about what I wanted to talk about, I was really focused on this idea of online success. So my experience, and I've worked in advising admissions, and right now I work at Northern Kentucky University in kind of strategic initiatives and data analysis for student success. And I've been in a number of convenings and trainings and conferences and around the idea of student success and gateway course success. And it always felt like most of the conversation, most of the ideas were really geared around traditional student enrollment and traditional course modalities. And in the back of my head, because, especially as an advisor at KCTCS, I was like, well, there's a lot of online students out there. And I sometimes feel like they get forgotten, especially in the kind of the onboarding process, thinking about course success for these gateway courses, which is the focus of this collaborative team. So kind of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to get into here as I share my screen, and actually just double check and make sure that you see what you should be seeing. All right. Look good, Ashley?
No, I still see all of the participants.
How about now?
Yes, I can see the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So there's kind of a couple reasons. And first off, I want to draw attention to my AI generated picture here that I used for the slideshow. I put in student working diligently on their online studies. And you can see they are indeed working diligently on their online studies. AI sometimes not the best with words and tests. So otherwise, really great picture. So kind of my purpose in this session is really to draw awareness to the online student population in Kentucky. And to do that, I got access to a lot of CPE data. And so we're going to look at CPE data for online course enrollment and online student success, both broadly and then specifically within gateway courses. Then we're going to go into some breakout conversations to talk about the data that we're seeing. We're going to talk about some challenges, some opportunities that you all are seeing. And what's great about these communities is that this is a mix of professionals from higher education. We've got faculty, we've got staff. So there's opportunities here to talk across the kind of continuum of the student enrollment experience about ways that we can improve this experience for students. I think there's a lot of great, stuff through like Blackboard for KCTCS for online course development and creation. But I've always thought you could have the best online course with the best faculty, but if students aren't, onboarded and aware and have the right mindset, routine, preparation for being successful as an online student, it doesn't matter how great the online course is. So it really takes kind of the whole continuum of the onboarding and the course experience for online student success. So we're going to talk about some challenges and opportunities for that. Then finally, we're going to reflect and have some takeaways. With these sessions, I really want it to be more than just you're here for a little bit, hear some cool things, and then you go on to something else, and that's in the past. I really want to hear and spend time to really have a meaningful reflection and think about some takeaways that both maybe change your mindset on these things, but also things that you can take back to your institution, raise awareness there, or have conversations there, or maybe some implementations that you could do there. So the way this will be structured, we'll go through the data awareness piece, we'll have the conversations, and then we'll spend some time at the end having some meaningful reflections. So if you've been in this community of practice in the past, we've had some great conversations in our breakouts, but it always felt really short. And so really thankful for Ashley to have this idea to expand this out to 5:30 to give us an hour and a half to really kind of dig in and have longer conversations about kind of what we're talking about, and then more time at the end for meaningful reflection. So hopefully that will be what happens. So something I want to kind of emphasize here throughout this session is really engagement. So I want to focus on, sorry, this whole little bar thing. You probably can't, can anyone see this bar here? And I need it to go away. It's right in the middle of my screen. Doesn't matter.
We don't see a bar.
Perfect. That's good. I don't want you to see the bar. But what I want you to do is engage throughout this session. And I want you to do that through two ways. I want to use the chat as a running dialogue throughout this whole conversation. I want you to share thoughts, feedback, comments, surprises. I want to hear what you're thinking. And I don't need it to be things, I don't have to respond to everything, but you all can have conversations. Like I said here, think of it like a live discussion board that you're running track of your thoughts and kind of comments throughout. I'll look back at it at the end and kind of see what people are saying, but I just want you to kind of engage through that way. If you do have a question about anything, please use the raise your hand feature, and I will see that pop up. I've got the participant list here, so I'll see who's got their hand raised, and then you can come off mute and ask your question. If you need to use the chat to ask the question, if you can put it in bold, that way it will stand out in what is hopefully a lot of comments that will be posted up, and we'll kind of do it that way. So if you have a question, put it in bold in the chat or use the raise your hand feature. All right. Appreciate the engagement throughout. Hopefully, I give you lots of things to respond to. So let's dig in. Let's start with a pretest. So this is also a test on your all's engagement. So here's the first question. What do you think was the percentage growth of first-time credential-seeking undergraduate students taking at least one online class? And this is going to be at NKU between fall 2019 and fall 2024. So put your thoughts or what you think the answer is in the chat. Again, this is first-time students, so first time in college, credential seeking. So they're not, not the dual credit population. These are undergraduates and taking at least one online class. What was that growth? If it was 1% in 19 and 10% in 2024, that's a 9% growth. So what do we think?
John, can you see the chat?
I can. I've got it pulled up. I see lots of numbers popping in here. And so wow, you guys are some very interesting thoughts here. So for the most part, everyone is way high. It's actually, well, actually, I've got two more questions. Hold on, hold that thought. So you're all way high, but I'll give you the answer in just a second. Question number 2. What percent of credential-seeking undergraduate students in Kentucky, and this is at public institutions, so KCTCS in the 4 years, took at least one online class in fall 2023? What percent of credential-seeking students across Kentucky, undergraduates, took at least one online class in fall 2023? A little bit closer on that. Last question. What percentage of same population, credential-seeking undergraduate students in Kentucky took all of their classes in an online format in fall 2023? So completely online students across the state of Kentucky. I see a lot of 5, 10, 20. Somewhere in the ballpark. All right, let's get some answers. So the first question, and I can only look at NKU for this one. To be transparent, I had a short time frame to kind of put all this together. I got access to the CP data last Friday, and really wanted to. There's so much more I could look at, but I didn't have comparison data between different semesters. But I can only do that where I'm at, which is in NKU. So that's why we're looking specifically here at NKU. The answer to question number one is a 30 percentage point increase. So I've looked at percentage point. So I know people might have heard percentage increase. So sorry if that was miscommunicated. So fall 19, there was only about 18% of the students that took at least one class with an online modality. Last semester it was nearly 50%. So about a 30 percentage point increase at NKU. So for the useful. That question, like I said, most of you are high, but I think that's because I probably didn't say it correctly. All right, questions 2 and 3. And of course, I put these up backwards. So on top there, 25% of all degree seeking students were taking all their classes online. So those of you said about 25% completely online, got it right. And then we split it up into sectors. So you can see the difference between the public 4-year and the KCTCS sector. So KCTCS, nearly almost half of students were completely online. The publics were only 13.5. Now, a lot of the data that I'm going to put here is going to kind of break out sector-wise KCTCS versus public 4 years. I don't do that to compare them directly, but they will have different rates. And really what we're looking at here is comparing the modalities, right? Online versus the traditional modality. But it's just easier to break out the sectors because I think there's some interesting findings there. The other question was, how many took at least one online class? That is 2/3. 2/3 of Kentucky undergraduates in fall 2023 took at least one online class. At KCTCS number is almost 3/4, and the public 4 years at 62%. And then if we look at course enrollments, so these are all enrollments by every student in that population, undergraduate credential seeking, all of their enrollments, about 35% of them were an online modality. And you might be wondering, what exactly does an online modality mean? Great question. So what we've done here is use the CPE definition of distance learning, because that's when I got the data from CPE, that's how it was set up. So basically you had each class and it was either distance learning or not distance learning. The definition that CPE uses is 50% or more of that course is online. So I would believe in that definition. For those of you at the KCTCS level, a hybrid course would be considered a distance learning course if it's a true 50-50 hybrid course. If it's something where they're on campus twice a week and maybe there's a portion of the class that's online, if that's reported as 75% in-person class, CP definition would be that's a non-distance learning. So I always like to kind of put in the definitions of how we categorize this data. So you can kind of see there with the KCTCS numbers, over 50%, over half of the course enrollments in fall 23 were an online modality of that definition. All right. So something I wanted to kind of get into a closer look here was talking about different programs. And there's a reason why I'm going to do this, and I'll show you with the success comparisons. So this is just specifically for KCTCS, and this is at the category level that was presented by the CPE data. And so right now you're seeing it ranked in terms of total enrollments. So liberal arts and sciences, that's your associate arts and associate science majors, most likely to transfer, and you can kind of see. Again, these are credential seeking, so it could be certificate earners, it could be degree earners. Right now you're just seeing the percentage of online enrollments. So some of these programs are highly online. Some of them, as you might imagine, like registered nursing, and those are students that are in the nursing program. The majority of their classes are going to be in person. Same thing with HVAC, automotive. There's some programs like human services, 86% online enrollments. Even your transfer students, your arts and sciences, that's a 65% online enrollment rate. So if any of you work in recruitment or admissions, something to think about as you're wondering, where these students are going to go, if many of them are taking their courses online, they're going to look at online programs more likely than not for the transfer funds. So keep that chart in mind. We'll come back to it in a minute. So let's get into some comparisons of success rates with these modalities. First, let's look at DFIW rates. So that's students that made a DF, incomplete, or a withdrawal grade in that course. And so again, what we're going to look at here is the differences in modality. So what I've highlighted is basically 3 different comparisons. So students, so we're looking, the first box there, that's all enrollments. So difference between traditional enrollment rates versus online modality rates. So you can see here, it's pretty even for the public 4 years. There's not much difference between online versus in-person or traditional modalities in terms of DFW rates. KCTCS, it's a little bit more broad. There's about a 9-10 percentage point difference in DFW rates for the online modalities. The bottom 2 boxes there are looking specifically for student population. So that's a difference in students that are completely online versus students that are taking none of their classes online. The bottom box are students with at least 1 online class and students that are in no online classes. So that group of students, we're comparing the DFW rates within that group for completely online versus non-online. You can see it kind of holds true for the 4 years. Not a huge difference in terms of modalities, a larger difference there at the KCTCS level. And remember, use the chat for thoughts, feedback, reactions, comments. Make sure you're sharing your thoughts there. So same look, but we're looking now at cumulative term GPA. So this is a calculation of the cumulative GPA in these different categories. So for the first one, for example, all KCTCS students, it's a calculated GPA based off of their grade. And CP takes away the pluses and minuses, which is nice. So it's a straight A, C, D, F. And then calculated GPA based off of that. Doesn't include anyone that didn't get a grade of an A, B, C, D, or F. So withdrawals, those aren't counting against this calculated cumulative GPA. Again, comparisons between these modalities. You can see the public 4 years, pretty similar experiences for online versus traditional. The KCTCS level, there is a little bit of a gap there between modalities, where students in traditional modalities are performing better. And now, if you're starting to think like I would in this session, and like I did when I was doing this data, there's a lot of reasons that could explain that. And one of the ones I would think is that when you're looking at this, modality, you're thinking a lot of these technical programs, they're going to have a higher, GPA rate for their traditional courses. Think of welding, think of automotive. Those students that come and show up and put in the work, they do well, they make A's and B's. Those classes are traditional. They're going to have a higher GPA rate just naturally than what an online modality is. But we're going to dig into that just a little bit too, as we look at specific gateway courses. And again, that chart that we just showed, this is the same breakout into the programs, looking at the differences between cumulative GPA for online modalities within those programs and traditional modalities with the courses that students are taking based off of that major. Some things jump out here. So as we just talked about, those technical programs, there are some pretty big differences in the cumulative GPA rate for traditional modality versus online modality. And that is potentially explained by what we were just saying, right? Those students that come to class, that are in class for automotive, HVAC, welding, they're there, they're doing well. Those online modalities, if you've done advising or if you know these KCTCS programs, likely those courses are general education classes. And so maybe it makes sense then that those are a little bit lower in terms of the GPA rate versus traditional. And there's some like the liberal arts and sciences, pretty close, about 0.5, 0.05 off. And there's some that are larger than others. There's some outliers. Registered nursing makes sense that it's a higher online GPA because that's not their nursing classes, which are more difficult. That might be, humanities course or a math course or something that they're getting out of the way for their requirements. So I thought that was kind of interesting as we look at, there's a gap between online versus traditional for all KCGCS, but when you kind of break down into some of these high enrollment programs, you can see some of them are close in terms of modality, some of them are larger gaps. I thought that was kind of an interesting deeper dive into it. But I just did this about an hour ago because I was kind of going through it and I had that same assumption, like, well, I'm sure those students that are in welding programs are taking English 101 online and they're struggling in it. So this was kind of a check of my own assumptions. So this is looking specifically at English 101, divided up by these programs and by modalities, looking at DFW rates and GPA. But you can see here, surprising to me, students, and you can see welding, HVAC, automotive, they actually had better DFW rates and GPAs for online English 101 versus traditional versus an in-person class. That was really interesting. For your arts and sciences major, they had about 11% higher DFW rate, or 11 percentage point higher DFW rate for their online modality versus in-person modality. So a bit of an assumption check for me to say, well, maybe that's not the case, that students are taking gen eds and struggling. Because if you just separate into this specific course and look at modality, some students are doing better in the online modality. Now, it makes sense when you compare, again, the modality overall, because students that are doing those technical programs in person typically have higher GPAs. Again, show up, you learn, you put in the work, you do well. And those are in person. So that kind of skews the difference between the modalities. But if we look specifically at like a gen ed course like English 101 that all students have to take if they want to get a degree, it actually, in the case of some technical programs, they do better in the online modality. So lots of interesting kind of things to take out of that. So let's pause for a second. Let's turn back to the chat. Let's think about some takeaways, some questions that you are thinking right now, some comments about what you're hearing. Were you surprised by some of this data, by the high number of online enrollments? Were you surprised that it wasn't as high as you thought it might have been? Surprised about some of the success rates? Were you surprised that there wasn't as much difference for the success rates for the online modalities at the 4 years? Those of you that are in that field, is that something that you were expecting? So just some things to think about, keep in mind. Again, the chat is slow, so let's put in some thoughts there. What's coming to your mind right now? And again, you can put some stuff in, but come back to it as we get closer to the discussion, because you'll have time to have these conversations yourself. I just want you to kind of be putting some meaning behind thoughts here too. The last thing I wanted to share was when I was looking specifically at NKU data, I was seeing the same thing. Students that were in online versus traditional modalities had pretty similar success rates. And I was wondering if that would be the case if we started disaggregating the data and looking at things like first gen versus non-first gen, if they had a high or low high school GPA, if they were a Pell recipient, URM, those types of things. And it stayed the same. Now, if it's like a, Pell recipients had a little bit lower success rate overall, but the gap between online versus traditional modalities were the same as the other populations. So again, interesting that students are experiencing similar success rates across all populations, at least at NKU, where I was looking at. I think there's some rich opportunities to do more research in this, and that's one of the avenues that I really like to kind of look into there. So again, this group that we're in for the Kentucky Student Success Collaborative is looking at Gateway course success. So what we've been sharing are just overall enrollments, overall success versus in the different modalities. So what I wanted to kind of dig into here is if we looked at the idea of a Gateway course and how that success rate is compared to different modalities. So Gateway courses have a broad definition, and I think our job is still to kind of line up what that definition is and what is a Gateway course. Right now, it's kind of become, a math course and the first English course. and we all know there are other, very common gateway courses that we could look at. Thinking about anatomy and physiology for health science students, thinking about general psychology for many students. But right now we're going to focus on English and math. So what I did here was basically look at all these enrollments across the state and flag them as either a Gateway English course or a Gateway Math course. English was pretty easy. KCTCS is English 101. Other 4 years it's English 101. Some it's English 100. You know what I'm talking about when I say Writing 1, English 101, that specific course. So we're looking at those enrollments. I didn't include co-requisite enrollments. If it's a separate co-req course like English 100 for KCTCS, I did include it if it was an enhanced course, like an English 101W that NKU has, where it's built into the course. So it's still the English 101 class that students take. It just has an enhanced component with more support. Again, additional research, you could do more digging into those different things. But right now, we just kind of looked at all students taking that English 101 course. For math, a lot more difficult. So what we try to do here is look at different tracks that a student might be taking their first college level math course for different programs. So we're looking at courses that don't have a course requisite. For example, like Statistics 220 in KCTCS. You have to have Math 150 before you can take that course. So Stats 220 is not a good gateway course, but Math 150 is. So what I did was try to go through the catalog and look at what that would be across the state. And so here is kind of the table that I created. Well, actually created. I made the list. Actually made it look a lot prettier. And so this is probably not comprehensive. You might be somewhere and like, well, this should be a class that is added on here. Again, something that we could kind of tidy up in the future and deeper research, but I think it gets the job done for what we're trying to do here. So you can kind of see the courses that we used for in this category of gateway math courses. Okay. So here are the outcomes. So this is first looking at the English outcome. So what we're seeing here are number of total enrollments, the percentage of those enrollments that were in online modality, and then we're looking at DFW rates for modalities, DFW rate for all courses. Second box, that's your GPA rates, same thing. And so we're comparing success across the modalities. So a few things jump out here. So for English, 57% of students in KCTCS took English 101 in an online modality in fall 2020. Over half. That's a lot. And you can kind of see here at the bottom, there's a pretty significant difference in success in English 101 across modalities. Now, if you look at that all number, it's going to be pretty skewed because you're looking at a lot of students at the public 4 years that are taking courses mostly in person and doing well, right? Versus KCTCS, where you're taking a lot of students are taking it online and maybe struggling a little bit more. So there's a bigger gap when we look at it across all. So that's why we kind of have it broken up into the sectors there. So across the state, it's over 15 percentage points higher DFW rate for online course modalities versus traditional, and nearly half a grade point higher GPA when students take English 101 in traditional modality versus an online. Again, that's across the state. But you can see across the case of TCS breakdown there, it's still a little bit higher. Even the publics have a higher DFW rate for the online versus the traditional than what the case of TCS has. So really kind of interesting thoughts there on English 101 success, the percentage of students that are taking English 101 online, and what that looks like. We apply this to math. Some of the same things. Case of TCS, it's even higher. Almost 2/3 of students were taking a gateway math course in an online modality in KCTCS. And the success rates were a little challenging. Nearly a 50% DFW rate for the online modality in math and below a 2.0 cumulative GPA. So you can kind of see as you're looking again at the total metrics there, it evens out a little bit for the public 4 years. It's actually pretty similar for the traditional versus the online modalities for math. KCTCS is not as vast of a difference as it was for English. And across the state, it's still about a 12 percentage point difference for GFW and nearly, well, a little over 0.4 for the GPA. So some interesting findings. Again, it's important, I think, to understand really the online population. And so for me, I wanted to raise the awareness of just how many students were taking these critical gateway courses online, especially across the case of TCS, because as we get into these kind of takeaways from it, when we have conversations and we're making strategies and we're planning about gateway course success, we have to consider the online component. We have to consider the online student because in many cases, it's over half of the students that are taking these courses are doing it online. And so we really have to kind of build that into our planning, our strategies on how to support these students in an online format. Again, this is stuff that is going to come up when I turn it over to you all for conversation, but really thinking about, the challenges that online students are having, but what are the opportunities? How can we support those students? How can we improve onboarding? How can we improve the advising experience so students are prepared for an online course and know what to expect? Because there is, across, English, what we saw, math, what we saw, there is a significant difference in the success levels for those different modalities there. So I want to thank Chris and the DAA team at CPE for providing that data in a pretty short turnaround when I requested it. It was a great weekend for me of digging into this data. And that's not sarcasm. I actually had a lot of fun with it. So, yeah, going to turn it over to you now. And I see there's some thoughts here. I will read these as we get into the discussion breakout groups and follow up as needed throughout. But I want to turn this over to you. So we have some breakout rooms set up, I think, Ashley, and I think Nan's here as well. So right now it's a little after 4:30. So let's set, what do you say, Ashley, 30 minutes for time for breakout sessions?
That sounds good to me.
And if you all just get bored with each other and there's nothing being said, which I don't think will happen in my experience with these conversations, it seems like people have a lot of things to say. But just think about some of these thoughts and these questions here, right? Like, what stands out about the data? What surprises you? What are some strategies? What are things that institutions can do? What are things faculty can do? What are the opportunities here? And how do we understand, and wrap our thoughts around why? When we're looking at these discrepancies of success rates, why is that the case? And what can we do then as this team, this, Student Success Collaborative, our team, what can we do to address this question in kind of a statewide manner? So those are some great things to talk about. I'm looking forward to hearing that. So we'll take about 30 minutes. We're going to come back and then we're going to have some meaningful share out. So if our CPE senior fellow that's in each group can take some notes and share out, but I also want to spend some time and we'll have it in the chat too of kind of what you individually are thinking and we'll take away from this. So think about that too and what you'd like to share out. So with that, Ashley, I can turn it over to you or Nan to get the breakout rooms happening.
Okay, I'll start them.
It felt about right. If
Okay.
anyone else feels the same way, I thought it felt about right. I'll get back to sharing my screen here. So let's go ahead and just have some folks from the breakout group just kind of give a little reflection, give a little takeout or take away from what came out of your conversation. So I've been talking for a long time, so I'd love if someone else to talk for a minute so I can take a break. So any of the senior fellows want to jump in and kind of share out?
I can start. This is Kanya. We had a great conversation in our group, and our group was combination of KCTCS and 4-year partners. But what I found really interesting was and I learned a lot, and things that I'd like to take back to my institution. But there are some, what I thought was really interesting was a master course model where consistency is so important for our students. We discussed how our students sometimes do not even know how to work the computer. So they're taking online classes and they don't even know how to work the computer. So they're getting all these different types of courses based on the instructor. Well, there are several folks that we spoke with who have pre-built start here modules or master course model where it's a consistent look across all online courses. So that helps students kind of know what to expect, where they're going. I thought that was awesome. I wanted to take that back to my folks at HCC. We talked about how students receive help online, and that's a good segue for my session next month about academic support. So we want to be mindful of making sure that our students have resources that are available for help if they need it. We also talked about how there's so much that we can't control. So how much can we control versus what we can't? So for instance, our student population are folks that are traditional, what we consider traditional students, non-traditional families, children, maybe poor study habits, certain things we can't control, but we want to be there to support students in whatever way that we can. So we discussed that. We talked about technology preparation for our faculty, making sure that they have the time and the resources they need to design good online courses. And I really appreciated one of the people in our group. He said the DFW rate being higher is not necessarily a bad thing because it shows that we're not sacrificing rigor in online modalities. So we really just had some robust discussion about faculty, assistant student support, and course design. So I'll quit rambling, but I was writing fast and fiercely. So yes, lots of why questions, definitely. Yeah.
Thanks, Kanya. Who wants to jump in next? How many groups did we have? Do you remember?
I was 4,
Mhm.
so I'm assuming
Cool.
4.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and do my group. This is Kasha. One of the major topics was an online learner orientation concept that's being started at one of the institutions where she's offering these basically mini orientations live, virtually, online, sending out an email invitation for students to register. And it's an opportunity to truly onboard online learning. So where they go, how to get into the LMS system, how to get into the email system, how to get into the student service system, how to get and find the resources they're going to need from an online perspective, and just simple basic best practices for being an online learner. And it's an excellent idea, something that I think lots of the different institutions could easily incorporate and offer. And it's been pretty well received. Like she's had over 100 participants every semester. So these are students who chose to come to an online orientation because they knew for whatever reason they needed a little extra information, or maybe they was their first semester back and they were just scared, So I had good conversations about the idea of an online orientation, and then other good conversations about how this impacts some of our other conversations like student basic needs. The fact that such a huge percentage of our students are taking online classes, then any conversation we have that discusses the whole student, the basic needs of the students, has to include this idea of technology. It has to include that they're going to need these laptops. They're going to need Wi-Fi, that we cannot address the entirety of our students without addressing these technology components, both the soft and the hard technology. if we want them to have a level playing field and 67% of KCTCS students are taking a math class online, then we've got to make sure they've got the tools to be successful in that environment. And then just led into some very good other conversations about how we help these students get these resources, how to direct them to the resources. Why is there such a difference in the KCTCS success rates or the DFW rates versus the 4-year? How much of that is socioeconomic? How much of that is preparedness? And I know John disaggregated the data a little bit and was still seeing the same trends. So looking at that from a larger perspective, I think would be interesting to us. I think I touched on everything. If somebody else wants to chime in from my group, but it was a really nice conversation.
Good. Glad to hear that. Good stuff, Tasha. Do we have one other breakout group and then I'll wrap up?
Sure, I'll go next. Dr. Shane Redmond from EKU. One of the things I find fascinating and wonderful about these breakout groups is we all get sort of the same instructions and same guiding questions, and we have totally different conversations within each breakout group. And so our breakout group talked about some of the challenges that our online students are facing. And the two big challenges we came up with were communication. How you can have a student in an online course and they behave totally differently in an in-person course, that the gregarious student can learn from the culture of the others and not say anything if nobody else is saying anything. And so how to get that communication going. Well, you know, if we had a solution to that, I think we'd be given national talks and conferences on how to get that going. So it's something we need to work on and figure out how to improve that communication. And then one of the other things we talked about was, well, what do we do with exams in a course like this? And we talked about we had the entire gamut as far as exams and proctoring go in these online courses. We had some instructors where there was no proctoring at all with exams. We had others where we do online proctoring with a couple different options. To the other end of the spectrum is there are no online exams. You have to show up in person or go to a physical proctoring center to take your exam. Each of those groups face their own challenges. When there's no proctoring at all, you have to worry about artificial intelligence and those sort of cheating issues. When you go with online proctoring, you know, this technology, there are a million things that can go wrong, and they will go wrong at the most inopportune time. And so things from proctoring services which don't offer the quality that we need, to technology issues, to the weather issues, to anything that can disrupt online proctoring. And then in-person proctoring, well, now that's an extra burden for some students. Some are international students and might not have that sort of option. So what can we do to not place that additional burden on students as far as in-person proctoring goes? And so turning those challenges into opportunities we can explore, an idea of something that maybe CPE can put some feelers out for. Is there a possibility to set up a statewide network of sites where students can come for proctoring for their online exams? Can we work out an agreement between the regional universities and the community colleges to say, hey, we've got this office that's open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. You have an online exam. You can come here and take your proctored exam, maybe even charge a nominal fee to help pay for that. And you just go to the nearest community college, and the instructor knows that it's proctored in a controlled environment, and we're all helping each other out that way. I know I would be wonderfully interested in something like that if we can make that happen.
Interestingly enough, that did exist at the KCTCS level for quite a few years. But then COVID.
Well,
There is
good.
there is a consortium of those testing centers, although they're not as densely located as we might like.
Mhm. Yeah, you almost have to get the library networks in as well. Like you can't just rely on the schools unless it was like elementary schools. I don't know. I think those math people among us were all for the proctoring. And anything we can do to help support proctoring. And I think as AI gets more extensive, other subjects are getting on board too.
Yeah, there is a fee like $25 to $40 usually, but you know the convenience has a cost, I think. 50 plus I see. Yeah. But now some people are immobilized by health impairments and things like that. They won't be able to go, but there's got to be a price for something of that kind of value.
I agree. There will always be some who cannot take advantage of those services. You know, I'm thinking international students that we serve would be hard to, of course, take advantage of those services. But if we do have anything we could do to help those regional students and maybe even across state lines with local colleges in Ohio, Indiana, this has got to be a national issue. We can't be the only state and only community facing this issue. Don't know, something to think about.
Well, and that's really, one of the things I wanted to get out of this session was to start thinking about big ideas that could happen on a state level that can, start to work to solve this problem and understand the problem itself. So I'll share out my group, but while I'm sharing out, I want to go ahead and get people to start thinking about a couple things. I'd like everyone to take a minute to share in the chat, 2 things here. So your primary takeaway from this session, either from the discussion, from the data, what stood out the most to you that when we leave this session and you think about, all right, what did I just spend an hour and a half doing? This is what I'm going to remember. This is what I'm going to take away. And then 2 is, what is your personal next step, either for yourself or for your institution on this topic of online course success and gateway course success for online modalities? What are those 2 things? So I'm going to let you all think about those things and put them in the chat here while I'm wrapping up. So our group talked about a lot of the same things. Proctoring was a topic. Ed made a good point about the fact that students may jump into an online class and then see the proctoring requirements, and that could cause students to drop. Or they get to that point in the class where they have to do a proctor test and they choose to withdraw because they don't want to do it or can't do it. It's also important to think about, as we're hearing, the gamut of experiences with proctoring across KCTCS. Now those students transfer over to the 4-year and they do have to do proctor tests and they do have a different online course experience. How is that affecting their transition? Are they more likely to struggle now that they have gotten used to one way of an online course and now they're jumping into another? So that, I thought that was a really interesting thing. And then Brenda had a couple great points on things that she's doing in her online math courses to really help support students. So, I mean, she's talking about how she's doing outreach individually to students and calling and checking in, just to kind of make sure they understand how the online courses are working and how they're doing. She also sets up evening supplemental instruction time to be more flexible with students that are in online courses and their work schedule. She was saying that she's still having trouble getting students there, but she did say she had like 7 students come to the last one, which to me, I was like, that's a pretty good amount if you ask me. She had like 11 out of 40. And so to me, I was like, that's actually better than I would have thought. So that's stuff we have to think about too. And that, I think there's ways that doesn't have to be individualized by certain faculty. That should be systematic, right? Are there ways that the KCTCS system could incorporate system-wide supports for online success coaching or online tutoring? And it may already be happening, but some things like that. We also talked about the challenges of course loads and online classes and we've been at the cap, but it's an online course. There's as Brooke said, there's no fire code. We can bump the cap up a little bit, get more students in there. We've got to get that enrollment numbers. So some challenges there, but again, really good conversation. And again, what I'm hoping that we can start getting to are there opportunities on a state level to affect change for online course success? And so something I'm thinking about, and I just looked at the chat and Tina mentioned best practices. Is there a way that we could collaborate and collect best practices? What about support resources? Are there, conferences that people have gone to? Are there virtual conferences? Are there convenings, trainings? What are other people doing that's working? Have we worked with places like Western Governors, which you have your own thoughts about Western Governors, but they have a pretty successful online course model. My understanding is correct. What do they do that's working? How do they onboard their students, right? So what can we get from other places that have been doing online and doing it well? How do we bring that back to the state? And then, my hill that I always will die on is the importance of the onboarding, the advising conversation, explaining expectations for online courses. Elizabeth and our group talked about how they have, like Kasha said earlier, an online orientation course that you kind of get in a sample course and see what the Blackboard or Canvas or whatever the module is, what that experience is like, how this works, how to upload an assignment. Is that something, again, systematic and put into place where Elizabeth said it wasn't mandatory? Can we make it in a way mandatory? And I know there's a lot of challenges with that, but ways that students are getting more exposed and understanding how online works and how to build routines and build mindsets of how to be a successful online student. So all good challenges there. I'm seeing a lot of stuff pop in on the chat, so that's great. Keep them coming. Keep thinking about your takeaways, your next steps. To me, the thing that keeps me up at night when I think about all this conversation is, and Shane, we talked about this when we were meeting as a small group, was what are these students learning? And how does that compare to the in-person modality? And how do we assess that? As we talked about the challenges with cheating and AI and proctoring and all that, like how do we ensure that the guardrails are in place, that students are really learning at the same level as an in-person class? And that's always the thing that keeps me up at night. So we've got just a couple minutes. I'll turn it over to the last slide here. And Ashley, I'll let you jump in if there's anything I'm missing. We've got a couple things upcoming in the collaborative. March 27th is going to be our what was going to be the panel at the Student Success Summit. That was supposed to happen back in February. Snowed a lot in Lexington and got canceled. So the rescheduled session for that's going to be on March 27th. On April 10th will be our next community of practice event that Kanye is going to run, looking at academic support strategies. We've got a QR code there to provide feedback, and I'm going to put the direct link in the chat. Once I find that email from Kasha. So please let us know. Again, you just spent an hour and a half with us, right? Like what was great? What could have been better? What do you wish it could have been? What are you still wanting out of these sessions? Let us know. Let us know what we can do to make this experience better for you all. I've got my contact information here. There's Ashley's contact. So if you have more thoughts, things that you want to share, again, things that we could be doing as a senior fellow team, as a CPE effort, give those thoughts to us. Let us know. So that's what I've got. Thank you all. Thank you so much for participating, engaging, sharing thoughts throughout the chat, the sessions. I'm going to look back and see what you're all thinking, but hopefully you got something out of this. It was worth your time. Ashley, I'll turn it back over to you if you want to do a quick wrap.
No, I think you said it very nicely. I thank you guys for joining us. Again, on the screen are our next upcoming programming. We hope that we see you there. And again, any feedback is great feedback that helps us with these statewide initiatives. And we're excited to continue the work as it relates to Gateway Course Success and all of our strategies here at the Collaborative. So I thank you guys again for joining us this evening and hope that you were able to take something away and continue the conversations with your institutions so that we can continue to do the great work. Thank you guys.
Thank you.